you think there is a possibility that Donald Trump drops out of the race. Talk to me about that, where that thinking comes from, and how that would happen.
Yeah, well, several insiders that I've spoken to.
Hello and welcome to The Rest is Politics US with me, Katty K.
And me, Anthony Scaramucci.
So, Anthony, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, Katty. We've survived another week in political firestorms, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking back to 3 weeks ago. It was only 3 weeks ago that we saw that photograph, you and I, of Donald Trump after he had just been shot on that stage in Pennsylvania with the American flag behind him and the blue sky behind him. And we both texted each other, this is the winning shot of the campaign. That was 3 weeks ago. And I kind of think this has been a wonderfully humbling reminder of the fact that elections are not set in stone and that events, dear boy, do matter.
I agree. And it's interesting. On my iPhone, that picture shows up as 1024 AD. It looks like it's 1,000 years ago. So this is what happens now. The cycle is moving so quickly. I thought that moment for him was a signature moment. And if you and I asked if the election was held the day after, he would have won that election. But the chess pieces changed now, right? And it's a chess game. Some of it is game theory, some of it is selection, but they've now got a candidate, and let's just call it for what it is. They have a candidate that, other than Fox News and some right-wing leaning websites, the entire media establishment is behind the candidate. They are building for the candidate. They're building up the candidate, and they're building a persona and a profile of the candidate as a savior of not democracy alone, Katty. The new buzzword is freedom.
And future.
Yeah, we choose freedom. We choose future. We're not going back. Okay, so they've changed all of the messaging. And she is a great salesperson, okay? And you need a salesperson at the top of the ticket. Now, she's improbable, Katty, because she got 1% of the vote in the primaries. She was selected during the George Floyd crisis in the United States, but she's the accidental candidate, the accidental nominee. And as you and I both talk about, this is a surfing situation where there are candidates are on their surfboards with their platforms, and a wave is coming in. What wave is it? Is it a return to 1947? That's the Trump wave? Or are we going into 2025 with a imperfect union that's trying to make itself more perfect? That's the issue.
Okay. We won't get into all of that. Anthony, you are a producer's nightmare, by the way, because there is an order. I'm meant to come in, we do a bit of chit chat, and then I do the show menu. It's called the menu. It's there and it's highlighted. Poor Fiona, our producer, is at this point having palpitations. We're going to get into all of that. So we are on this show, we are going to talk about the nightmare week that Trump has had. His time that he spent with a room full of Black journalists in Chicago at a conference that did not go, I think, the way that he planned it to go. I think he deliberately went there for a fight. I want to get your take on that. But actually, the fight was against him. He was not winning it. We're going to look at Kamala Harris's week and then a little bit on the Veep stakes. We know that next Tuesday, she is planning to have the big rollout in Pennsylvania of her vice presidential pick. We will talk about all of that. Then we're going to take a quick break and we are going to answer some of your questions because, believe it or not, in the last 3 weeks, which have felt like an eternity in American politics, and who would have predicted we were going to be where we are now, which makes me wonder where we're going to be in 3 weeks' time. Because if can all happen in the last 3 weeks, who knows what's going to happen in the next 3 weeks? That's a teaser for you, Anthony, because you're going to get to that in a second and your prediction. And we're going to answer some of your questions because you do have a lot of questions. We're going to look particularly at why evangelical Christians have become the bedrock of Trump support. So let's start with that National Association of Black Journalists meeting conference up in Chicago, where Donald Trump was invited onto the stage with 3 exceptional Black women journalists. And I think he went there thinking to himself that he's going to get a fight, that it's a fight he felt he was going to win. He was then going to replay all of the clips from that fight of him up on the stage talking about race to his supporters, to his MAGA supporters. But actually what happened during the course of that is that he came across as a bully, as kind of old-fashioned. His views about America seemed to be exposed in a way that was also old-fashioned. He kept calling the female journalists nasty and rude. At one point, the room laughed at him, which I'm sure he didn't love. And I'm not sure that Black journalists conference went quite the way he hoped it was going to go. What do you think, Anthony? Was that a win for him or not a win for him? I'm not sure that it helped his campaign, because I'm not sure it grew his base of support.
Well, let me just start out for saying for sure it was not a win for him. He lost something there, and he has very good to great, let's call it great political instincts. And he was extremely angry after that. And the reason I know that is the way the Pennsylvania event started. He went back to Pennsylvania, as you know. David McCormick, who's a friend of mine, and I believe you know David McCormick and Dina Powell. David is running for the Senate. And he was so flustered, and he had teleprompters in front of him. He said, "You're a great, strong, great, courageous leader who's running for governor. Do you want to come up on the stage?" But David's running for the Senate. And he made 5 or 6 major gaffes like that. And they are not typical Trump gaffes where he'll mispronounce a word because he's not a great reader. They were just gaffes based on, because I've seen him. Remember, I did 71 campaign stops with him. When he loses his temper, and I guarantee you on that flight to Pennsylvania, he was off the hook, upset about how that went down for him. And
because it didn't go the way he expected.
It did not go the way he expected. What he wanted to do was he wanted to blow up Kamala Harris's spot about being Black. He thought that was going to go over well for some reason. I don't know who told him that was going to go over well. I'm going to give you what I learned from the campaign on that in a second. But the second thing that he did is he wanted to leave there scaring the Democrats because he, in his mind, believes that the African-American community loves him and that they're going to embrace him, even though they're actually not going to embrace him. And he dug himself a very big hole. But just 2 quick things. When he uses the word nasty, it worked with Megyn Kelly in 2016. He called her nasty. Then he, excuse me for saying this, I apologize, but I want to say it to our listeners. It's how crazy he is. He talked literally about her menstrual cycle to Don Lemon, like 4 days later, and it worked for him. Okay, but remember what I said earlier, right? 20.2 million baby boomers have died. We have 33 million people in the country that are of voting age that identify as racially mixed. They have different parents from different places. God bless them, the story of America.
It's the fastest growing racial group in America is people who are biracial. There were 3% of the American electorate in 2010, 10% of the American population today. So
she went to a historically Black college and university, Howard, right? She has identified her whole life as African American and South Asian. Her mother was of Indian origin. First of all, Katty, in 2024, how on God's earth could this possibly matter? Okay, but it does matter to a group of people that Trump is trying to galvanize. So he was out there. He has shed La Vida and he has shed Wiles for the moment. Why has he done that?
Those are the 2 people running his campaign who actually up until now have done a pretty good job of keeping him kind of on the straight and narrow.
By the way, I think they've done an amazing job. I've said that. I got Harris people mad at me for saying that. They're extremely disciplined.
But they've done an amazing job while he was ahead in the polls. When he's behind in the polls, it's a different story.
But let me tell you, and again, I'm sorry I'm hogging this, but because I've got this information from people that know what's going on, and I want to share it with everybody. So here's what happened, okay? They're doing great. Project 2025 is a thorn in their side. It's not polling well. People think it's a fascist, racist movement. And this is classic Trump. He put 85 people, I have the list in front of me, 85 people into Project 225. They're all his people. He's met with them many times. The person that wrote the foreword to the book, Project 2025, is a gentleman by the name of J.D. Vance. Anybody know who that is? And so now he's trying to disavow it. This is what he does. When he fired me, he said he barely knew me. Okay, if you look at the tweets when he started attacking me, he said that he barely knew who I was, and I claim to know who he is. That's his MO. He goes to that MO. You could play golf with him, Katty K, for 40 years. You could be at the 9th hole at the halfway house, drop dead of a heart attack. He'll turn around and say, "Who the hell was that? And who could play the last half of this round with me?" That is Donald Trump, the most transactional person you ever meet. So he's now run over those 85 people. And he's got guys like Mike Cernovich who are with him saying, this is mutiny. This is blasphemy. You've blown out all of the people that have been with you, all your loyalists, and you're listening to La Savita and you're listening to Susie Wiles, who are Bush people, who are DeSantis people. They're from the original group of GOP, and you're leaving the people behind. So now he shed those guys for a moment, and he went back to the maggots. Make America great again. I add the T because it sounds like maggots, like things that eat your flesh, right? And the maggots are telling him, blow the racial dog whistle as hard as possible. Let's get every racist in the country. You identify with that when you want to, right? And as I said on Twitter, he's not a white racist cracker because he's orange. He's more like a Ritz racist cracker, and that's him. Okay, so he's out there blowing the dog whistle, and it's not working, Katty. And now he's got a tug of war between the maggots that are like, you blew up 2,225. Why did you do that to all of us? We're so loyal to you. And La Savita and Wiles are saying, do you want to win this goddamn thing or not? What are you doing?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. And he is torn. Look, so here's what J.D. Vance actually wrote in that forward to Kevin Roberts' book, who is the leader of Project 2025. He wrote, the Heritage Foundation, which is the group that came up with this, Project 2025. The Heritage Foundation isn't some random outpost on Capitol Hill. It is and has been the most influential engine of ideas for Republicans from Ronald Reagan to Donald Trump. This is the problem for Trump. He's put in place somebody who is a kind of conservative policy geek. And I think Trump is much more comfortable when things are personal, when he can go on attack about personal things. He doesn't like things to be written down. He doesn't like to be pinned down on policy. And there is Vance, who he is now, by the way, given the most tepid endorsement of any presidential candidate I have ever heard of. Their vice presidential candidate was Donald Trump this week, suggesting that actually at this same conference, well, the vice presidential pick doesn't matter very much anyway. People are really only voting for me. He's probably right about that, but it's not exactly. If you, by the way, Anthony, if you ever go on a show and somebody asks you, what do you think of your co-host? And you say about me that I don't matter, that Lamborghini of yours is going to end up wrapped around a lamppost. That is not the kind of thing that you say.
Wait, are you going to hire somebody to drive it, or are you going to take it? You're going to take it.
I'm going to take it and
you're going to jump
a lamppost.
Oh, holy, like James Bond, like the British female James Bond.
Like Jane Bond.
You're going to roll.
That's it.
You're going to roll the car and roll out of the car. All right, I'm letting Tony Pastor know he owes me a Lamborghini because I'm going to go say some bad shit about you now to see you do this. This will be fantastic.
This will be great television.
Fantastic.
But, I mean, who talks about their vice presidential candidate like that?
You carry the show, girl. I would never say that about you.
Nobody talks about. I have never heard a presidential candidate talk about a vice presidential candidate in such dismissive ways. But who knows if he can get rid of him? I think he's found himself when he was riding high. You embrace things like Project 2025. You put the ticket on J.D. Vance. And then the problem for Donald Trump is he doesn't know how to run an effective campaign when he's behind in the polls. And what's happened in the last 3 seismic weeks in American politics is he's gone from being ahead in all of the polls to starting to slip in some of those swing state polls. And he can't figure out. He can't figure out how to run a campaign like that.
So I want to test something on you. Okay. And I want to get your reaction to it. So we have said, and you've agreed with me, or I've agreed with you, I can't remember who said it first, but we've said he's able to say 2 contradictory things at the same time, simultaneously, and get away with it. Mm-hmm. And I now believe that people are getting a little tired of that. And he was able to do that because he was running up against an 81-year-old that was in heavy decline. Joe Biden, great guy. He'll go down in history well. But he was not capable of running the campaign that Vice President Harris can run. And so now he's caught in a tongue twister. He can't do the things that he was doing to Joe Biden to Kamala Harris. Do I have that right? Or is he getting caught up?
Yeah.
Or am I missing that?
I think he thinks he's still back in 2015, 2016, when this played well and America is changing. My feeling, and it always has been about Donald Trump, is that the backdrop to a lot of Donald Trump's support is that in 2044, America becomes a minority white country. And you have a whole load of white men, in particular men out there, who by virtue of their race and the fact that they have a Y chromosome, have been given historically for centuries a position of power in every society, but in the United States as well. And they can see that power slipping away. Women are starting to earn more than them. They are better educated than them. There are more of them in Congress. God damn it, there might be one of them in the White House soon. And I think that's producing this real fear, which is what gave us Donald Trump elected in 2016. The problem is, the country has changed, as we discussed last week. The country has changed since 2016. Those numbers of people who are biracial in America are just one sign of that changing. And people are like, this isn't even interesting anymore. I mean, to your point, this isn't interesting anymore. And I think when Kamala Harris dismissed all of his comments at the Black Journalist Conference as same old show. By the way, I think that word old was very pointed. It was not a mistake that she used the word old in reference to Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. I think that's the way Democrats handle this. It's sort of boring. And I don't think it has the traction that it had in 2016.
There's another Harris here. And I don't know if you picked it up, but I watched the tape 4 times. The woman's name is Harris Faulkner. And I think you know Harris, and I know Harris very well. I've been on the air with her at Fox. She's an amazingly gifted African-American female journalist. She was the last woman on the panel. She was to the far right of the president. And by the way, she's a fan of the president's, and she works at Fox News. She gasped, Katty K, when he called Rachel Scott a nasty, nasty woman in that bullying way that he's done successfully for 8 years. She gasped. Okay, I don't remember exactly what she said.
She even said something like, "You're serious?
Seriously? Oh God, are you serious?" Yeah. Something like that. Yeah. Okay.
This is unbelievable.
That's when he deflated. That's when the anger started, because he's not a dummy. When he lost Harris Faulkner, who's an African-American that he sees as part of his African-American base, when he lost her on the stage, that's when he started losing his way in the conversation. That's when the conversation went completely haywire on him. And that's when he got back on the plane and he blew a gasket on the plane. I've seen that gasket blow, by the way. And that's not a fun thing for staff when his gasket blows. So now she went on Hannity last night. Okay, so Sean Hannity, obviously been famous talk show host on Fox last 20 years, high-rated show. And she tried to dig herself out of her body language by praising Donald Trump on Hannity's show last night. But if you watch that tape, which I did, it was quite active last night, Katty K, in preparation for this. Okay, she was very.
It was when I was getting the 3 a.m. texts. I was a little.
You were getting 3. Yeah,
it was time for sleeping.
I know, I was still up. But anyway, she was so blah, like the wind was out of her, and she was so, oh my God, this guy's losing it. Okay, now if he is losing it, it's going to be very, very bad for him. But you know that 3 weeks ago we thought he was winning the election. So in 3 weeks' time, we'll have to see what happens. But if I were on the Kamala Harris staff, stay disciplined, stay on message, do things that work with your crowd, go into unexpected territory, but that's safe for you. You know, do things that will keep you in the spotlight and on message that we're not going back. If I was Donald Trump, I would say, hey man, go into the bathroom, the gold-plated toilet bathroom with the gold-plated faucets, splash some water on your face, and go back to La Savita and Susie and say, what the hell is going on here? And how do I change myself?
Yeah. Chances of that, Donald Trump changing himself. Mm-hmm. I mean, one of the things we've learned about Donald Trump is that he doesn't change himself and he's immutable. He's the same guy he was in 2016. He tried for a very little while to be nice.
But he was on message discipline for a while, Katty.
He tried to be on message. Okay, so listen, you tweeted something that I want to bring up this week, Anthony, which is that you think, and it's making headlines in the States, you think there is a possibility that Donald Trump drops out of the race. Talk to me about that, where that thinking comes from, and how that would happen.
Yeah, well, several insiders that I have spoken. Remember, I still have friends with Trump. I still talk to a lot of U.S. Republican senators. I'm on many of their donor lists. You'll find me there. They're tolerating Trump. They're putting up with Trump because they want to stay in power. But he's not their cup of tea because of the way he handles himself. And some of these people have suggested to me, particularly people, political insiders, he does not want to go to jail. And his number one thing, I'm running because it looks like the Supreme Court's going to give me broad immunity. It looks like I can pardon myself from every bad thing that I've done. and I can play golf, let other people run the country. It sounds like I could bring in all these Project 225ers eventually. They'll run and dismantle the democracy while I'm playing golf. And I'll be free, and I'll probably make a couple $1 billion off the presidency. So I want to do this. Okay, fine. So he's doing it. But if he drops in the polls, number one, he's lost the popular vote twice. He's the worst presidential candidate for Republicans since Herbert Hoover. Herbert Hoover lost the House, the Senate, and the presidency. Only 2 Republicans have done that in 125 years. That's him and Herbert Hoover, Donald Trump and Herbert Hoover. So he does not want to lose to Kamala Harris. Trust me on that. Okay, and if he could figure out a way to cut a deal, and I don't think they pardon him, but could he go to Hochul, governor of New York, Biden, and Brian Kemp, the governor of Georgia, and could he say, hey, I want to be commuted, I have a sentence commutation, I'll plead to something, no jail time for me. He steps out. He could do that. The other thing he could do is he could say, you know what, XYZ is going on. He's always hints at health issues. He could designate, he could kick Vance off the ticket because that's not going to work. He's got negative ratings. We'll talk about Vance in a second. And he could go with Haley and he could go with DeSantis. They would be formidable against Vice President Harris and whoever her pick is. We'll go into those in a second. But my point is there's paths for him if he drops in the polls and the predictive markets shoot up and he starts to panic. There's paths for him to get out of the race, blame it on a health issue, cut a deal, and avoid jail. So there are 3 things in Trump's brain: money, attention. It's not running the country or serving people. It's money, attention, and the third thing is avoid jail. And if he starts losing, he's going to see the bars. You ever play Monopoly, Katty? Look at me.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, you remember the guy with the, he's up in here
I
like
was
this?
always the car. Your Lamborghini, ideally.
You were the car. Oh, my God. If you smash my Lamborghini, I mean, because I'm like a social media whore. Could you imagine how good that would be on social media? Your kids would be upset with you, though. I know a few of your kids like Lambos.
So basically, Trump is trying to get that $50 get out of jail free card.
100%. So I know people say, okay, where are you getting this all from? I know how this man thinks. This is not sourced. I just want to make sure that people know that this is an analysis based on his personality and talking to a few insiders. Sourced was Kamala Harris is replacing Joe Biden before the end of July. Here's how it's going to go down. That was sourced. But this is just analysis based on knowing him and knowing what he's now up against. Okay, he's up against an Obama-like movement. Okay, there are women in this country that are saying to him, I'd like my reproductive freedom. I would like my daughter and granddaughter to have reproductive freedom. Is Kamala Harris going to take that from me? I don't think so. And oh, by the way, I want to see a woman president in my lifetime. You see what's going on?
Yeah.
And he's trying to rationalize his way through that, and he's having a hard time. Well,
look, this has been a campaign of weird and wonderful events happening that neither of us a month ago would have predicted. Or even before that debate would have predicted. I didn't predict how badly that debate was going to go, and I didn't predict the speed with which everything was going to unfold, although I was hearing the same stuff as you were hearing about Joe Biden stepping down. So let's see what happens. I mean, I'm so reluctant at the moment to call this election for November because so much has happened that has changed it, and Harold Macmillan was right. Events are the thing that every politician worries about. And let's see what more events there are going to be between now and November the 5th.
Katty, I know we have to go to a break, but I just want to ask you, do you think J.D. Vance is going to stay in the race?
I think if Donald Trump stays in the race, God, we're doing so many permutations here. If Donald Trump stays in the race, I think he keeps J.D. Vance because it's very hard for him to admit he's made a mistake.
Okay, so I think he comes out of the race. I think Trump has already realized that he's made a mistake. He fires people. And I think remember, he loves attention more than anything else. And I think he's trying to figure out a way, how do I fire this guy after the Democratic National Convention? Because I'm going to fire him. I'm going to reach out to Nikki Haley. I'm going to reach out to some of these other people because I got to make a calculation here. I'm now running against a woman. Haley's very politically ambitious. Can I get her on the ticket and swap out J.D. Vance and go the last 70 days with Nikki Haley, Haley Trump versus, now we'll talk about the VD pick, but it's Haley Trump. And so if I'm Donald Trump and I want to win, he's gone. He's already talking about him like he's yesterday's news, and we wrap fish in yesterday's news.
Like
and remember, he just blew up Project 225. And so he's like Tony Soprano. He'll run over you in the gas station. He'll squash your head like a melon. That was the last season of Sopranos, in case you have Soprano fans out there. And that's Donald Trump. He'll run these people over. So I think he's out of the race. I know it's a long shot call, but I'm going to say that. I understand why you think he's in the race. Who do you think is going to be Kamala Harris's VP?
So I interviewed Mark Kelly, the guy you like, who is the senator from Arizona this week, the former astronaut, 25 years in the US Navy. It was the first interview. I interviewed him on Morning Joe. It was the first interview that he had done since Joe Biden stepped down from being the nominee. I thought he was good. He's solid. He has a great resume. He's not a world on fire communicator. And I didn't see him as easily as I see some of the others up on a stage with JD Vance, if that's who the VP pick is. I asked him if he was going to be the VP pick. He demurred, as they all do in Veep Stakes weeks, although, of course, they're actually there auditioning and hoping that she's watching. He said it's not about him. She's got a lot of great choices out there. He made the point of saying that he had served 25 years in the US Navy. He praised Joe Biden. So he said all of the things that you need to say if you're auditioning to be vice presidential pick. He just didn't say them in an amazingly punchy, succinct, charismatic way. I have to say, if I was going for pure political athlete, the person to take on JD Vance is clearly Pete Buttigieg. He is the one who does it super articulately. He relishes the role. He's been very good on Fox News. I still don't think that you're going to have a woman of color, and a gay guy as the VP pick. It's kind of sad to say that about any country at the moment, but I suspect that's where we are. So I'm still thinking it's Josh Shapiro because of the Pennsylvania thing. I don't think that actually any vice presidential candidate brings a state. And anyway, he's already governor of Pennsylvania, but he ticks a lot of boxes. He's super articulate. And I think he's going to be a better fighter on television than Mark Kelly is.
Okay. I just want to state for the record, Katty, that my friends and family that listen to this podcast, they listen because of you. It has absolutely nothing to do with me, because you just said in the most elegant way that we're not going to have a black and a gay guy on the ticket together. And you said it in a way that didn't offend anybody. And of course, if I said the same exact thing, people would have set their hair on fire. So I have admiration for you like you cannot believe, okay? But I think it's going to be Shapiro.
We'll do etiquette lessons as our future podcast, you know.
My first mother-in-law told me I needed elocution lessons. I was 20 years old. I was like, I didn't even know what elocution meant. I had to go look it up in the dictionary. It was bad, Katty. It went downhill from there.
That is why you're on your second mother-in-law at the moment.
That's true. She likes me though. She makes coffee for me. She's very nice. But anyway, the first one, I don't know. Whatever. I probably should cut that out of the podcast. But anyway, back onto the real show. I think it's going to be Shapiro now. So I know I changed my mind a lot. Forgive me, because facts are changing, so I have to change my line.
I like that. No, I like that you change your mind and that you.
It's not that I don't like Kelly. Kelly's bringing Virginia and he's bringing Arizona. He's in the military, but everyone's going to be mad at me, and the most mad at me is going to be Senator Tim Kaine if he listens. And I like you, Tim. You're a great guy, but Tim didn't give Hillary Clinton what she needed because he was a moderate white male. Okay, Josh Shapiro has got firecracker in him.
And he says young. He says new. He says we're turning the page. He's competent.
But he's competent, executive.
He fixed a bridge that had fallen down in the space of a week.
He is Mike Bloomberg's protege and my favorite politician of my lifetime. Okay, at the state level, Mitt Romney for me at the national level is Mike Bloomberg. You know, I served on Mike's Financial Services Committee for 5 years. He is a brilliant man. He's a generous man. He did so many things privately and quietly, and he has mentored Josh Shapiro. He's one of Josh Shapiro's mentors. I think Josh Shapiro, who I had the opportunity to meet, my friend David Urban, I think you know David. He's on CNN. He's a Trump supporter. I work with David in Pennsylvania. David Urban introduced me to Josh Shapiro at the Army-Navy game, and what a cast of characters was there, right? We had Bill Barr, we had Mark Milley, we had Josh Shapiro. We were in Philadelphia. It was quite a cast of characters. My wife was like, this was like a zoo of political has-beens. And I was like, am I a political has-been? You better be a political has-been, is what she said. But anyway, but Shapiro is bright. He's competent. They like each other and they know each other a long time, and he won't Bigfoot her.
Yeah.
Okay. So if I am
He's
her
smart.
if I'm her and Doug, I want somebody that's not going to Bigfoot me. JD Vance, I don't know who's advising him. He tried to Bigfoot Trump. He didn't do it on purpose, but he tried to Bigfoot Trump at the convention. You can't do that to Trump. 1 minute on yourself, JD, 35 minutes on how great Trump is. I mean, come on. Over a minute, you're losing the audience, fella.
Josh Shapiro is a grown-up. He's sensible. He's smart. He gets that.
A waterfall of money, Katty. A waterfall of money from Wall Street for him.
So we have been getting so many of your questions. Thank you for those. Keep sending them on Twitter, on Instagram, at RestPoliticsUS, that we thought we would spend this half answering some of the ones that have come in. They're great. We're not going to get to all of them, but we're going to try and get to as many as we can, which means, Anthony, we have to keep it snappy.
We're going to keep it snappy, but where can they send more questions? I love these questions, Katty. So where do they send them?
At RestPoliticsUS on Instagram and on Twitter.
Okay, great.
Keep sending them there, and we'll sort out, other ways for you to get them to us. But we're getting lots.
I sent in several anonymously, by the way, just so you know.
I know it's like those when you get a book out on Amazon, you got to write your own reviews.
Oh, I've been there and done that, and I've also bought my own book. This is like a confessional. This podcast. I feel better now.
Now, the first one comes from Justin. Justin has written to us. Justin Meltzer has written to us. Considering that religion is such a talking point in American politics, how do you feel the steady rise of irreligion, atheism, agnosticism, none, and how it skews younger, affects this and future elections? You take that one, Anthony.
Okay, so I think it's a great question because I think it is a factor, but I don't think it's going to be a factor in this election personally. I think this election is a pivotal one demographically where the baby boomers are the biggest block of voters still because they're older, they want to vote in their Medicare, and they want to vote in their Social Security, and they're still reasonably to very religious. But I do think this is a big factor. I will point out to our European listeners and our UK listeners that for whatever reason here in the United States, there are more practicing religious people still as a percentage of the population. There's less agnosticism. So I don't think it's a factor in this election. It's a great question, but this is a 28-32 thing that has to be addressed.
Yes, 68% of Americans still identify with the Christian religion, and Donald Trump gets about 81% of the white evangelical Protestant vote. We've mentioned this book before. I can't recommend it enough.
Tim Alberta.
If you want to read Tim Alberta's book, The Kingdom, the Power, and the Glory, it explains really well why the evangelical movement has become so enthralled with Donald Trump. And yes, part of it, as many of you know, is about Supreme Court positions and judge positions and getting conservatives into those positions. But Tim Alberta makes this compelling argument that the evangelical movement has become a more nationalist movement than it is a religious movement. He talks about them putting America over the kingdom of heaven and over Christ. And I think that's such an interesting way of framing what's happened to the evangelical movement, that it has shifted into this kind of nationalist mode, and they see Donald Trump as their standard bearer. And so they show no signs really of abandoning him. But it's a great question. And I think we'll make sure we do a program really diving into the evangelical movement, because I think they're fascinating, and how Trump kind of co-opted them and what they would want out of a second Trump term. Okay, second question from Alex Baxter. What do you make of Trump's bizarre comments about Jewish Democrats? So this week, Donald Trump gave an interesting interview in which he sort of complained. It was kind of a grievance interview in which he complained about the fact that he had done all of these things for Israel, and yet Jewish voters didn't support him in the kinds of numbers he would want. He said, look, I got 25% support from Jewish voters in 2016, and then it only went up by 1% in 2020, despite all of the things that I had done for Jewish voters, like moving the embassy to Jerusalem, the American embassy to Jerusalem in Israel, all of the things that he had done around the Golan Heights. Anyway, it was a sort of weird litany of complaints about the fact that he doesn't get more Jewish voters. And some Jewish voters that I have spoken to since he made those comments have really been offended by that, because there's something similar to what I think he did up at the National Association of Black Journalists thing, which is where he felt as a white guy, I'm not quite sure why he feels as a white man, that he can define what it means to be Black, or he can define what a good Jew should do. And there is this kind of old trope that, well, Jews have a dual identity and a dual loyalty, and that they should be, they should behave in a certain way. It's like, nobody would say that to an American, you can't say that you hate Joe Biden or that you hate Donald Trump, right? But somehow being a Jew means that you have to feel certain ways about Israel. Anyway, I think that's where he's going there. What do you think?
Yeah, well, I'll just say three quick things. He called Doug Emhoff, the second gentleman, a bad Jew.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so that was like a ridiculous comment. Who the hell says that? But remember, the Orthodox, when you say 25%, just for our viewers and listeners, it's primarily the Orthodox community. And so what's interesting is you mentioned 87% of the evangelical Christians. And so they're the literal interpretation of the New Testament, and the literal interpretation of the Old Testament, the Orthodox Jews, are for Trump. So he's got the orthodoxy of both of those religions, because they believe he's malleable, Katty, and they believe that he will do what they want. As an example, for 50 years, we're not moving the embassy, it's staying in Tel Aviv. Donald, here's some dough, move the embassy. You give me some dough, great, let's move the embassy. That's what happened with J.D. Vance. We're getting some dough into the campaign, great. I'm going to win anybody. Nobody gives a SHIT about the vice president. Let's put in J.D. Vance. And so he's malleable. And so these guys know this. They can get their judges in, and the Orthodox Jews can get what they want for Israel. But the Jews that are non-Orthodox, again, these are my opinions, so I just want to open up and share them. They believe in more tolerance, and they don't like his intolerance. And they feel that he blows these dog whistles, and these dog whistles open up Pandora's box of hatred. And some of that hatred does land on the Jews. And of course, we have seen globally a rise in anti-Semitism. And so those are the 75% that are worried about that.
Politics generally is about addition, not subtraction. So telling voters that they should be happier with you and that you've done more for them doesn't seem to me the most successful way of winning them over. It just seems like a fairly sure way of pissing some people off. I'm hogging all the questions here. Here's another one.
No, please.
This is from Graham Lucas. This is an interesting one too. It would appear that the Harris VP pick has to be a successful male politician, preferably a governor from a swing state. Is that cast in stone, or are there other picks conceivable? We spoke about this a little bit in the last half. There was one other thing I want to say on this, that I think it's pretty clear that Kamala Harris has become the nominee almost, I think you called her in the first half of this program, accidental. And I think that's kind of a really interesting word, because getting through the American primary system as a woman or a person of color is really hard. You're asking primary voters to choose somebody as a candidate, as a nominee for the presidency, who doesn't look like any other president in American history. We've never had a female president. So you're asking them to kind of say, does this look like a president, this guy, or does this look like a president, this woman? And so often ask, Amy Klobuchar, Kirsten Gillibrand, Elizabeth Warren, all very qualified women who ran for the presidency in 2020 and were all basically discounted by primary voters because they didn't look like what the image of a president has always been, with the exception of one black guy, all white guys. And I think Kamala Harris has managed to be so successful so fast because she avoided the primary process, and now she's being presented as the solution. But it doesn't mean that American voters, or that the Democratic Party feels that American voters are ready for either two women or two black people or any other permutation. It looks like the feeling in the Democratic Party is that she has to have a white man, and probably a straight white man alongside her. Very well said, and I agree with you. I just want to bring up a historical reference, and if people have an interest in this, Google Gerald Ford on woman president. In 1989, the former president, he was out of office. He left the presidency obviously in 1977. He gave a speech, and they asked him at the end of the speech, will there ever be a woman president? And he said presciently,
Yes, there will be. What will happen is there will be a candidate for the presidency that puts a woman on the ticket, like Geraldine Ferraro took place in 1984, 5 years later. He said, and that woman will rise to the presidency. She'll either rise to the presidency through a death or illness, or she will be the next person to run as the nominee. And he literally laid out what happened 35 years later. And so it's a weird part about our country, because this is an amazing country, Katty. You know, I have a love affair with this country. I've talked about my ancestry coming from Italy as peasants and what we've been able to build here in this country. So I have this unconditional, undying love affair for the country. And it's a nation of varying political sects and varying ethnicities, et cetera. But there are some stridency things in this nation. One of them is the hypermasculinity in the nation. It has sexism in the nation. You and I both talked about this. So her breakthrough will be an amazing event for the country. And I think she's going to have historic voter turnout as a result of this. I know there are women out there that would typically vote Republican that are saying, geez, I really want to see a woman president in my lifetime. She's going to protect mine, my daughter, my granddaughter's reproductive freedom. You know what? When I close the curtain, I'm voting for her, no matter what I say to my friends at a cocktail party.
Yeah, and I think what she's doing that's smart at the moment is she's not playing up the female card. She's not playing up the race card. I think this campaign has learned quite a lot from Hillary Clinton's campaign in how to handle the attacks. Reportedly, I'm hearing they are getting so many attacks online aimed at her race, aimed at her gender, but she's kind of brushing them off. And I think that's, this
smart
stuff about it's the same old story, the way she's dismissing it. I think that's a really smart strategy, because women can't dwell on that. They've got to keep playing up her strengths, keep reminding people she was a prosecutor. She was, she's been a vice president. She's been a senator. Keep reminding people of her reasons why she can do this job, not get caught in the morass of sexism and racism, because you will never get out of it.
She's got a secret weapon on that campaign, David Plouffe.
Yes.
Plouffe. I think I spelled that right. He is helping her rebuild and re-energize that Obama coalition. He's one of the smartest campaign strategists that I've ever met. He has spoken at my SALT conference, as have you, Katty. And he's a brilliant guy. And watch how this unfolds for over the next 2 months.
Yeah, and he was responsible for getting Barack Obama elected in 2008. So he's a great addition to the campaign.
With David Axelrod, that is correct.
Nick Birch, this is definitely for you. I wanted to ask you about Donald Trump's sense of humor. Does he have one? I can't recall ever seeing him laugh, and his smile looks like a black mamba about to strike. Okay, I'm struggling to envisage that. But can Anthony tell us that he's a different person in private?
Yes. I can tell you that he's a different person in private. I can tell you that he is off-handedly and will take you off guard with his charm. And I'm going to tell you that. A lot of people that don't like Trump won't like that. But he could light you up on Twitter. He could say the meanest, nastiest things about you. And when he sees you, he'll say, oh, there's my Katty, or oh, there's my Anthony. Mark Milley makes me laugh. Okay, he's the former general, the Joint Chiefs. Oh, there's my general. He's like, when he says that, I'm looking for the cruise missile to come at me. You know, my point is that he is charming. The reason why you don't see him laugh, however, is that his jokes are funny. Your jokes are not funny. So if he tells a joke, he wants you to laugh. He has good delivery. He's got good timing. He told a funny joke the other night at the Philadelphia thing. It was very funny. Oh, Kamala Harris just happened to get this emergency phone call from Michelle and Barack Obama. Oh, are you guys together? There's 4 cameras in front of him. He knows how to tell a story, and he has good timing. He's a stage actor. Okay, he told me once on Air Force One that he won't eat before he goes on stage. I said, well, why won't you eat before he goes on stage? Well, Frank Sinatra told me once that he doesn't eat before he goes on stage. I said, well, why didn't Frank Sinatra eat? Because he didn't go on stage. He goes, well, he wanted his belly filled. He wanted all the blood up in his brain, and he didn't want to feel, overfed or somewhat tired when he got on the stage. I won't eat anything 2 or 3 hours before stage. Okay, why am I saying this to you? Because he's a stage actor in love with himself. He's funny. And Mr. Birch, you're not funny. Maybe he'll find Katty K funny, but he won't find you funny. And he definitely doesn't find Anthony Scaramucci funny. I can promise you that. Okay. So he doesn't like other people's humor, only his own. But he is charming. And that's one of the reasons why people are always taken aback by him when they meet him in person.
Yeah, everybody says that. I've only interviewed him once, and he is a lot more charming than in private and in one-on-one meetings than people give him credit for, and that he comes across. When you saw him on the stage at the National Association of Black Journalists, he was not charming.
No,
when he's in private and when he's in a good mood.
When he's using the nasty word, look out. Okay. And then someone's going to get yelled at after the thing's over.
So the producers are asking what it was like interviewing him. It was during the 2016 campaign, and I interviewed him for Morning Joe, the program I do in the US on politics. And I asked a question, and he said, "Oh, you, Katty, you've been very negative about our campaign, but you don't need to feel bad about it." I thought that was nice of him. He told me I didn't need to feel bad about it. But he told me that I had been down on his campaign. So he can be funny. He can be cool. He's a showman, and if things are going, I think the problem, and this is why this week is so critical, when things are going well for Donald Trump, he can play nice. He can try to be magnanimous. He can be the showman. He can be the charmer. It's when things are going badly for him and when he's slipping in the polls, he watches polls like a hawk, like he watches crowd sizes. And when things are slipping from in the polls, that's when he starts getting into trouble. And that's what we have seen this week.
I think it's well said. And the producers are not asking me what it was like to work for him, but I just want to point out I'm still in therapy over it. Okay, let's go to the next question.
Okay, let's do one more question. I think this is a slightly non-politics one, but it's one I keep getting, and it's one you're going to enjoy, and it's on the American economy. Daryl Henry, what are your thoughts on why the US economy is growing so much more than other advanced economies? I have one thing I think we should point out, and we've said it before on this podcast. America has seen a huge influx of immigrants, both legal and illegal, over the last 10 years. They are a massive driver of economic growth in the country. And one of the reasons that America came out of COVID so much stronger than other countries is because of the immigration, because immigrants pay taxes, which is something that, Republicans sometimes omit to say. Even illegal immigrants in the United States, people that they're undocumented, often pay their taxes, and they work hard. They often work multiple jobs, and they get things done. So that's one of the reasons the American economy has been doing so well.
Okay, so I'll just be quick on this, but there's four things. It's the fiscal and monetary policy that was inducted into the economy during COVID, Katty. Dropped interest rates to zero, sent $6 trillion into the economy, flooded the economy with money, which did cause the inflation, by the way. That would have been Donald Trump's inflation or Joe Biden's. That's part of it.
But gave people a lot of disposable income.
It did. And so we're still burning that. And the Fed knows that. And the Fed is now going to start cutting rates likely September, November, which is very good for the economy again. The immigrants you touched upon, so I'm not going to address that. But this is the number one thing for me, and I really want people to listen to this. If this is the only thing you listen to from me this week, our decentralized system. Okay, people talk about Bitcoin being a decentralized technology. The country has a decentralized government, and it protects people. It allows for broader freedoms and much more meritocracy. And this is right out of the Federalist Papers from several hundred years ago. Less people at the top crowding the power. More people can flourish in kleptocracies and authoritarian regimes. Smaller groups of people get ahead. They get ahead and they get very rich. This is why I'm upset with my billionaire friends. What are you guys going to do? You're going to make more money? You want to be in a land of oligarchs running the country? You make $100 billion. What the hell are you going to do with the money? You're going to be dead anyway. Help the people around you. I don't want to live in a McMansion with a barbed wire fence when my fellow neighbors are suffering. Let's create equal opportunity in the country like it is now, make it better, and a result of which we will continue to flourish and have another American century.
With that, we are going to wrap up this week. But listen, keep sending these questions in. They're great for us. They give us a sense of what you're interested in and what other subjects that we could explore as well in future weeks. So thanks for all of the questions. Keep them coming at Rest Politics US on Instagram and on Twitter. And we'll pick them up and run them again in future weeks.
And if you want to see my co-host crash my Lamborghini, Katty K in the Lamborghini, crashing it, please write to Goalhanger and see if they want to subsidize that.
Thanks for listening. This week, we'll be back next Friday with more American politics. I'm Katty K.
And I'm Anthony Scaramucci. Thank you for listening. Hopefully you'll join us next Friday. We hope to see you.